So with the latest Battle for Azeroth beta builds now, and the Q&A that just took place, we know a little bit more about Azerite armor, in particular the respecs, which is what I wanted to talk about now. So, in terms of the respec, how it's going to work is there's going to be a small amount of gold required, 5 to 10 gold, in other words, to reset all your traits. Now, that will work for any piece of armor. Doesn't do it for all of your pieces of armor, just one at a time, which sounds nominal, as they said. But it's going to ramp up. They described it as like the talent system in Classic WoW, Vanilla WoW. For those who don't know that, what happened is it cost you a certain amount of gold to respec, wasn't that much. Then if you did it again, it would cost you more and more, and it got to be quite a lot more. There was a cap on it, though. Now, they haven't said anything about a cap on this one. And if you leave it alone for a bit, then it also decays. Again, just like the talents did in early WoW. So, the bottom line, basically, is going to be that you won't be able to respec it in order to play different specs. So, if you raid, or let's say you play one spec in raids and one in dungeons, you know, and you do that regularly, you're not just going to be able to respec that because the cost is going to get too high. Now, we don't have a lot of details other than that. Although we sort of know roughly what it's going to start off at, we don't know how much it goes up when we do it again. We don't know how fast it ramps up in terms of the cost, where it's going to go. We don't know what the cap is, if there is even a cap. And they said about it decaying rapidly once we stop messing about with it. We don't know how long we have to not respec it in order for it to start decaying, and we don't know how quickly it decays back down to a reasonable gold value either. So on the face of it, you could look at it and say, well, we don't really know that we can't use it to respec at will. But we do, because Blizzard themselves said that. Ian Hazakostas in the Q&A said, you know, if you're going to raid, he gave an example of a raid, if you're going to like DPS on these bosses and heal on these bosses, you're going to need another piece. In other words, you're going to need other armor. He did say that, of course, you know, oh, but there's lots of ways you can get that armor. There's lots of places to get it, which is not necessarily true. Again, there's a lot of things we don't know about Azerite armor, but what's supposedly going to be the case is that the ones from the traits on raid Azerite armor should be better than from other sources, which means actually if you're using it for raiding, there aren't multiple sources. There's one. You know, and for the particular combination of traits you want, there may only be one boss that drops it as well. So, yeah. And it's not, I mean, this isn't even covering different roles. I mean, we're already used to the idea that if you DPS on some fights and heal on others, of course you're going to need, like, different trinkets and things like that. That's standard. But this is just even the same role, but for different specs. So if you're a rogue, for example, assassination and subtlety, you know, may well need different traits. Now, onto that, I mean, Blizzard did say, well, you know, some of the traits are generic and will work for multiple specs. As if to say, well, if you want to use it for multiple specs, just pick the generic one. But for people who want to play seriously and want to have any attempt at min-maxing it, that's not what you're going to do. So you are going to have multiple sets. Now, he did also say that Battle for Azeroth, it will be a lot easier to maintain multiple specs. It could hardly be worse than Legion. That being said, it's still, to my mind, artificially difficult, because this idea that we can't just respec Azerite traits as if they were talents, you know, I mean, what I would have wanted was, and I actually said, you know, we talked about it in streams, you know, have it work with the tome. So whenever we change our talents, in the same situation, you can change your Azerite traits as well. So if you're in a rest area, you can just change them at will. Outside of that area, you have to use a tome, except, of course, in, like, you know, Mythic Plus dungeons where you're not allowed to change your talents. You won't be able to change these either. That seems fair enough. But Blizzard said they don't want them to be like talents. They don't want to be seen like talents. And I'm not saying that idea is completely without merit. You know, I can understand the idea of this armor, you know, in reality, role-playing it, that you're supposed to be moulding it and then it's fixed. I get that. But they are talents. You know, they're what we have in lieu of talents. We don't get new talents anymore. The last time we got new talent was in Warlords of Draenor. We don't get new talents. In Legion, You know, the negotiation was, well, you're not going to get new talents, but you're going to get new abilities via your artifact weapon. That was our talent system. It wasn't terribly customizable because we ended up with everything, but that was the pseudo talent system for Legion. And the pseudo talent system for Azerite, sorry, for Battle for Azeroth was supposed to be Azerite armor. You know, that was the thing. So, but now they're saying, well, no, that's not the thing. You know, and they're likening it much more to the tier set bonuses. Of course, we sort of knew, you know, that as we thought, Azerite armor was there to replace. First of all, it was to give us the customization that talents would otherwise give us, as well as to replace tier armor, as well as to replace the legendary system of Legion. So they're likening it much more to the tier sets. In fact, they likened the traits to the equivalent of a 2-set bonus. So that's where we are in terms of what they've been saying there. Now, but yeah, so although I can sort of see some justification for not allowing us to change it at will, the fact of the matter is it is a barrier to maintaining multiple specs. People will see it as a barrier. If you end up having to farm multiple pieces of the same gear, and as I say, if you're getting these things from raids and that's the combination you need, there aren't multiple sources of it, there's one source, then that is going to cause trouble for people and is going to dissuade them from picking up multiple specs. Of course, the most serious players will go to that extra effort. Of course, that's ingrained in them, going to all this extra effort. But for even serious players, you know, lower down, that, you know, could still be high up by anyone else's standards, that's a lot of effort to go into. And also, it's not even effort, because you can't will the loot to drop. If the stuff just doesn't drop, then it's not dropping, and it's difficult then. So you're going to struggle because of that, and where, you know, it accounts for even a few percent in performance. For some players, that's quite a lot. And it is unnecessary. I mean, this is my issue. I think it's ironic that up until Legion, I always said that we had this barrier, because although we had dual spec, which came in Wrath, I believe, to be able to switch between 2 specs, you know, it wasn't until Legion that we were able to switch seamlessly between all of them. And yet the irony was, Blizzard do this quite a lot, actually. They bring in one system that solves a historical problem, but then they bring in another system to frustrate it. So in Legion, they allowed us to switch seamlessly between our different specs, but then put in a system that means that we're not going to be encouraged to be able to play multiple specs, because maintaining all of the weapons, or even 2 of the weapons, for people who don't spend a massive amount of time in the game, was difficult, was tricky. Not for the first time. The other big example I can think of is in Cataclysm, where, you know, they redid all the 1 to 60 content, and, you know, what was in their eyes an improvement. Other people were supportive of it as well. I wasn't, but that's fine. So they, you know, let's say they improved, in inverted quotes, but I'm not doing the air quotes, the 1 to 60 content. But then they also improved the looking for dungeon tool, which meant that no one ever saw it, because it was much more efficient to level just by sitting in Orgrimmar or Stormwind and, you know, going into dungeon queues. And, you know, they do these things where one system works against the other. Another one in BFA, of course, slightly controversial, is the global cooldown issue, which works against their idea of having more downtime. People seem to think that that supports it, actually works against it. But I explain that elsewhere. So, yeah, we have got this system where, because you're going to have to farm multiple pieces, you're not going to be encouraged. You're going to be encouraged to try, if you can, and focus on one spec, which a lot of people naturally want to do anyway. I mean, I remember some years ago actually saying to players, you know, you shouldn't, if you're a mage and you're applying to a guild, you shouldn't put down that you're a frost mage or a fire mage or something. You put down that you're a mage, you know, because the best mages are the ones who can play whichever spec. They're signing up as a DPS role, playing a mage. So you should be able to play all those specs. Of course, you'll have your favourite, but, you know, you should be able to adapt there. But actually, I said that much less in Legion, because it was actually a bit of a bind. In Battle for Azeroth, it's not as bad, by the way. Battle for Azeroth is definitely improvement on Legion. I can't argue with that. But is it good as it should have been? Were Blizzard, when they were thinking of this system, really considering how much it's dissuading people from playing multiple specs? And that could have a knock-on effect on guilds as well. Again, I'm not talking about the super serious ones. They will get the people playing the spec that's necessary for a particular fight. But much lower down where, okay, to a certain extent, it's less important. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't certain mechanics, on mythic fights especially, where you really save yourself a lot of time, 100 plus wipes, if you can have something that can deal with that mechanic easily, as opposed to dealing with it in a much more complicated way. And again, it's going to reduce the pool of players who potentially play all those different specs and are therefore of use in your roster. But that's where we are at the moment in terms of the respecs of it. In terms of the other change, which has largely gone unheralded, I have noticed, it's only a minor thing, it's to do with leveling. So before it sort of went out with beta, where we were with Azerite pieces, it's sort of gone through a bit of a sea change, in terms of leveling at least. Whether that's had a knock-on effect on any other thing, I don't know. So what was noticed when I first got into Alpha, other people noticing as well, you weren't really getting rewards that give you a helm, shoulders or chest. Of course, the Azerite armour slots. And we were thinking, well, that's because that's going to be Azerite gear. They're not going to give us normal stuff. Then it started to appear in quests, but with only primary stats, no secondary stats. Again, bit of an indicator. I was saying at the time, well, this is clearly going to be Azerite armour when they put it in the game. Then they gave us the one piece of Azerite gear, but the other quest stuff was still not Azerite armour. Then they rolled it out a bit more. So now all that stuff I'd collected from quests on those characters was now Azerite gear. So I had multiple pieces of Azerite gear on the characters I'd leveled all the way up to, at the time, 119. Now it's all gone again. And now it has all gone. They've reintroduced as quest rewards helms, shoulders and chests that have secondary stats on as well. So in other words, from quests at least, there are going to be just normal pieces for those slots. It wouldn't make any sense in any other content, of course, because you'd be doing that. You expect to do that level cap. What's the point? But what it does mean is you're not actually getting much, if any, Azerite gear as you level up. Because one thing Blizzard did say, and this was true until a few weeks ago, because I've been querying particularly, what reward are we getting for leveling anymore? I just don't like the World of Warcraft levels. You don't get anything. There's nothing there. There's nothing with it that goes, oh yeah, my character's now a bit stronger. If anything, it feels weaker. So, what is there to sort of go, oh, that my character has grown? Nothing. Blizzard argued, well, you're going to be collecting Azerite pieces as you level up, but you're going to be collecting very, very few of them. On the last character I leveled, it's level 100, nearly 115. I have one piece of Azerite gear, which I got at 110. First piece that you get quite early on. I haven't had any since. Not from any quests. I'm not saying there aren't any as quest rewards. And of course, the dungeons as possibility. But, not dropped in dungeon. And I haven't as yet done a quest that gives me another piece. So it's certainly not coming. It's certainly not anything you're going to associate with leveling. So that's another little change. A bit more minor one, because I can't see how that sort of change would affect stuff from level cap. But that did change anyways. So there we are in terms of, again, what we know about Azerite armour. We still don't know lots and lots. There's still a lot of details not really known about. We're just getting little breadcrumbs. So that's why I keep having to do these videos. Every time we get another little breadcrumb, I shall just put a magnifying glass on it and see what we've got. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share with other people for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.